But right now, let's move on to this story. It's all systems go for the official opening of the Gauteng Provincial Legislature today. The Speaker of the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, Morakane Mosupyoe, will preside over the official opening of the third term of the 7th Legislature, where Premier Panyaza Lesufi will deliver the State of the Province address. The Speaker of the Gauteng Legislature joins us now in studio to tell us more about the official opening. Good to have you. I'm so glad you came in. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thanks for the invite, Leanne. Good morning.
Absolutely.
And morning to your viewers as well.
So the Nasrec Expo Centre, long and once again been selected as the venue to host the elected members, dignitaries and guests. Talk to us a little bit more about the occasion.
The SOPA itself.
Yeah.
Look, the SOPA is convened in terms of Section 129 of the Constitution, read with Section 15 of our standing rules. Basically, what it does is to give the Premier an opportunity to give Gauteng residents an update on the commitments and priorities that they have as the executive. So it has to happen every beginning of the calendar year. So basically, it's the opening of the year, not the financial year, just the year of the legislature.
Yeah, it's an important event. It is very much so is, and perhaps maybe we can emphasize, you know, why it's so important to the people of the province of Gauteng. What happens at this event?
Well, government owes its existence to the very voting of the people. So the Premier, myself, and all the MPLs, we have jobs, so to speak, because people voted. And people vote because they want a government that will give them services. And they have to be updated periodically by people who are responsible. In this particular case, it would be the Speaker, myself, who have to convene the sitting so that we give the Premier an opportunity to speak to people of Gauteng about their expectations, which are not very complicated, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, exactly, because I think people just want services. But the complication comes in with the fact that people are complaining about these services, and that's one of the big problems. I mean, several Gauteng municipalities, including the one we're sitting in here, Johannesburg, we continue to face these massive service deliveries and people taking to the streets. And I think the one on the top of our mind right now is that of water. And we know this. So what's important, and I think we need to understand, how does the provincial legislature strengthen the oversight of local governance?
The legislature works through portfolio committees and standing committees. So if you want us to focus on local government, it would mean then the responsible portfolio committee would be that of COGTA. But it's important also to note that the province, even national, they're not legislatively allowed to interfere. They can intervene, but it must be done lawfully. So the work that is done by municipalities will find expression in the provincial legislature through the COGTA Portfolio Committee. Whatever commitments is made by COGTA, it must be aligned to the work that is done by the municipalities. But we also, as a legislature, work with Chapter 9 and 10 institutions. So the work of the AG, the Auditor General, is also important. Her inputs in terms of how municipalities perform, we have to consider that as the legislature through the portfolio committee that I just mentioned, COGTA. Yeah. And if work is not done, then we have to hold them accountable through the process that I just described.
And that leads me to the question of the Auditor General, because we look at reports where the Auditor General constantly highlighting recurring problems. We're talking about irregular expenditure, procurement weaknesses, consequence management. These are just a few of the things. So my question to you is, how is the legislature, or has the legislature, actually enforced stronger consequence management within provincial departments?
You know, what happened this year through the process, I'm sure you're aware that we meet as the legislature, and myself in particular, I meet on about 2 occasions in a financial year with the Auditor General, where they give us feedback in terms of performances of municipalities. They also recommend to the legislature in terms of consequence management. So what we have done this year, we had, I think, about 3 meetings, the 2 regulated meetings, but another one we had in terms of looking at especially the consequence management that you have just mentioned. You must also remember that the Auditor General has been empowered lawfully to take action as well. And I think she's done it in one of the municipalities somewhere. I don't remember the name of the municipality. So there's an agreement that we have come to with the Auditor General on how we're going to oversee the work of the municipalities, not only through COGT, but also through the powers that she has and the powers that reside in the legislature through the Speaker and the Public Protector.
And there's also the issues of portfolio committees, because these form major parts, and I think we've all become very familiar with them, with these open sittings, particularly with the portfolio committees that look into certain instances. But I suppose an important question as well to ask there is, do you believe that they're adequately resourced to interrogate these very financial complexes that we find ourselves in?
I do believe that they are. But the problem, the challenge comes between when the recommendations from the portfolio committee are then fed back to the departments, and those recommendations do not find expression in the planning of the departments. That is where the disjoint comes in. So it is our responsibility then as the portfolio committees or as the legislature generally to make sure that we hold MECs and their departments and their accounting officers to implementing recommendations from the portfolio committee. But the House also plays a role. And that is where then, MECs are asked hard questions, very difficult questions by members now, all of the members of the political parties represented in the legislature. But the Speaker is also empowered. I mean, if MECs don't do what they're supposed to do in terms of the recommendations that are sent to them, they can be summoned by the Speaker to come and explain themselves. And we can have a one-on-one or a portfolio committee, and if they still don't adhere to that, then we take it to the House, where everybody can see that, MEC, ABC is not doing their work. So I believe that portfolio committees are empowered.
Very important, and I just want to talk a little bit to the challenges. We started off by talking about some of the challenges during the State of the Province address that the Premier obviously is going to have to touch on. But I mean, when we look at, let's now zoom into Gauteng, unemployment remains a pressing concern, particularly amongst the youth. This is a huge thing. My question to you is, in terms of oversight role, what do you have in the legislature to ensure job creation programs to try and assist the situation?
Okay. What the Premier has done over a period of, since the 7th administration started, is that he expects all of the departments, and they do, we see them when they come to the legislature, to have within their annual plans a section that covers their contribution towards fighting joblessness amongst, well, especially the youth, but across the board, because other people of other ages also have, to be employed. But the emphasis is on young people, so it is embedded in the APPs of all of the departments. The legislature also plays a role. We also employ people. So recently we advertised some posts. It's a process that's slightly different from the executive, because we are not necessarily enjoined by the DPSA. We don't necessarily account to them, but we have the Speakers Forum, which guides us in terms of job creation. So generally, government in Gauteng is responsible for creating jobs.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, we look at the many challenges: crime, urban decay, particularly when we look at Johannesburg, Ekurhuleni, Tshwane. These things it's a big problem. I mean, in fact, at the moment in Ekurhuleni, we are seeing huge unrest taking place right now, health infrastructure pressures. The major hospitals are overcrowded, education infrastructure, school placement challenges. There are just so many things that come into this. And I imagine all of this falling under the domain of the Gauteng Legislature and having to get involved in all of this. And the pressures are huge. They're huge pressures.
Yeah. It actually falls under the domain of the executive. There's a principle of separation of powers. The executive is responsible for all of the things that you just mentioned. So the legislature the legislature's responsibility is to hold the executive accountable on all of those commitments, and the commitments includes everything that you have spoken about. So there's generally the description of government as the legislature, but there's a separation. So, and I think sometimes it causes a little bit of confusion from the side of the people, but I'm not necessarily saying that people are not, you know, intelligent enough, but they are, because people understand how government works.
Yeah.
That's my experience. I've seen it, and I know that people understand how government works. But that responsibility resides with the executive. So ours, as the legislature, is to hold them accountable to all the commitments that they have done, and they must implement.
And how difficult is that? Because particularly when you look at the government structures at the moment, I mean, you know, it's particularly... we're seeing it happen everywhere, coalition-driven. And this must make it incredibly complex for you. I mean, when we look at the impact that this has had on legislative stability, talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's, from my perspective as a speaker, it's very interesting. On the other side, it demonstrates a maturing democracy. When you have, initially we had eight parties represented, now we have 11. Some of the parties are represented by single members, but you have all these politicians, they have all their different manifestos, they have all their different expectations from the executive, but the beauty of it, and I still believe there's something good about it, because the electorate in South Africa forced the political parties to work together. That is the beauty of it. But yes, there is a complexity, like I just described, different manifestos. So for me, what it says is that because we owe our existence as government to, you know, the voting of the people, we have to work together. We have to find each other somewhere and put the interest of the people first.
Yeah, which you do, but of course, sometimes it's not simple. And then, of course, you've got the SOPA today, and I'm sure you've learned from past experiences how to deal with disruptions, political tensions, tempers flaring. You're expecting some of that today?
I hope it doesn't happen, because it's important. We have to put the people of Gauteng first, and ourselves, you know, later as politicians, we can always do those things in the House, or they can, because I don't, I'm the Speaker, I cannot do that, and other presiding officers. We are supposed to, you know, to hold them in check. But I hope we won't have any disruptions, because it's important for the people of Gauteng to hear what the Premier has to share with them.
Yeah. Well, one last question, and I think it's quite an important one as we end this, because as we speak to some of the issues, crime, I did bring that up as one of the major issues. And of course, one thing we heard from the State of the Nation address was possibly, or the deployment of the SANDF to combat illegal mining and violent crimes. What is the legislature's standpoint on this? You know, I don't want to take away from what the Premier is going to say, but I'm sure you are aware that Gauteng, through the Premier, has been agitating for that. Yeah. So we are generally happy as the Gauteng government that the President understood where we were coming from, and he, you know, he agreed. So we are hoping that he's going to keep the army here long enough to solve the problem completely. Because if they leave too soon, we stand a huge chance of it emerging again. So the idea is to eradicate it. So if the police work together with the army and do what they're supposed to do in law, then we should be able to eradicate that problem with Zamazamas. But that's not the only problem regarding crime. I mean, you know, I think it affects all of us in Gauteng. And the Premier has been saying, since he became a Premier, that it is very important that we fight crime in Gauteng, because if we don't, then, you know, it's going to be very difficult for us to get investments into the province. So it is at the top of his head, and I strongly believe that he's going to be speaking about it today. We wish you the best of luck. I hope the event goes smoothly and it's well. And we really do thank you for coming in and talking to us and educating us as well as to the work of the legislature here in the province of Gauteng. And this, of course, is the Speaker of the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, Morakane Mosupyoe. And that, of course, happening at Nasrec today. What time are you starting it? At
Gates open at 14 hours, but the
Okay.
Premier will be speaking at 18 hours.
But there we go. All right, 6 o'clock this evening, that's when this will all be happening. But I can tell you what's happening in just a couple of minutes' time. What's expected is, of course, that appearance of Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe's son at the Alexandra Court. And we've got Griselda Lewis, who is there. She's covering it for us. And that breaking news that we heard this morning is that the police have confirmed that he is now going to be also facing a defeating ends of justice charge. Initially, it was only attempted murder, so there's now additional charges, what they had said would happen if they, of course, go further into investigation.